Good afternoon, everyone. It's Martin Gershon with another episode of BetterHealth, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome you all here today with a terrific person, Kwame Marfo, who is the market strategy innovation leader in clinical development for Komodo Health, a company that is just really doing outstanding things to improve healthcare for everyone. And over the next few years, you will hear more and more about the amazing work that they're doing, which is really looking at outcomes and how to improve outcomes for healthcare. And Kwame, he's a passionate spokesperson for a mission-driven company. And he's going to tell you a little bit about the company's background. He's going to tell you the vision for the company and some of the really incredible projects that they're working on, some in collaboration with the White House and their cancer program. Um, I first really, as I do with every webinar, I want to thank everybody for incredible support. Every week we get so many people emailing, texting through LinkedIn and other forms of communication about the speakers, about their ideas, their questions, and we try to answer everyone's every week. And if we don't get to yours today, please know that we will send in follow up any outstanding questions. I also want to encourage people to let us know where they're signing in from. I want everyone to know that there is a real international community here, that there is an incredible presence uh, from so many countries in so many continents. So, first, let me turn this over to Kwame, and he can tell you a little bit about himself and pick it up from there because there's so much to talk about. I don't want to take up any more time.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Martin, for the opportunity to chat with you today and the folks who've joined us. Really, really grateful for this time together. Just want to echo again, looking to make this extremely interactive. Don't hesitate to ask any questions or put any comments during the conversation or definitely after. The work we are all engaged in definitely takes a community. And it takes a lot of questions to unpack the core essence of what we're doing to identify areas where we can collaborate. And I would say coming in today representing Komodo is really with an eye towards talking about our vision and our mission and looking for collaboration across the broader ecosystem. I'm going to say a little bit about myself. This is not about me. It's more about Komodo and the mission. You can definitely also check out my LinkedIn for my background, but very briefly, I've spent my career within biotechnology ever since I graduated and jumped into the health tech side roughly about 2 years ago. I built my career at Genentech, working in different capacities across manufacturing, technical operations, where we actually were making a lot of Genentech's cancer therapeutics for their clinical and commercial development, which was an exciting opportunity. And then over the course of time, that kind of transitioned out of that space and landed in the clinical operations business unit, where I had the opportunity to stand up an insights and analytics team for their global clinical trial operations, really looking to bring in the power of real world data and insights to shape how the teams are thinking about their clinical trial strategy and execution. And that's what really broadened my horizon to all the capabilities that were possible with real world data to really shift the landscape and get to actual outcomes. And I was extremely fortunate to hear about Komodo and the opportunities and the mission that Komodo was going after. And I'll talk about that briefly or throughout the course of this conversation, but really trying to shift the conversation and shift the approach to move from data to insights, but then more importantly to impact and outcomes. And it's been fantastic to be at another mission driven company that's really focused on that. So I know, like Martin said, it's an international audience. Health is definitely global, but it's also very local. And Komodo primarily operates within the United States. And for the folks who are familiar with the healthcare system in the United States, you'll have an appreciation of how fragmented it is and how there's still so many underlining challenges or opportunities, depending on how you view the world, to make things better. So I wanted to orient folks around a little bit about the healthcare system within the United States, and then talk a little bit about Komodo. And to do that, I have a quick video, which is about a minute and a half. So we can start the video, and then I can share a few more words, and then Martin, you and I can start a conversation.
Perfect. I'm going to pop that on. But first, I just want to thank everyone. We have Raj dialing in, Malik, we have Michael, we have Harvey. Please let us know where you're dialing in from, where you're logging in from. And here comes here comes the video. I feel like a director. Terrific.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Martin. So a bit more about Komodo. So we're a technology SaaS-based company located within the United States, headquarter offices in the Bay Area and New York, but then we're also fully remote as well. Definitely have embraced that. And our mission is to reduce the burden of disease, as you saw in that video. And if you fully appreciate the healthcare system in the United States, you kind of understand that a lot of the data that exists here is extremely fragmented and broken. And what Komodo has done over the course of our 9 year history is to begin to piece that data together, because we believe that the underlying data that exists is the source of so many insights that can ultimately lead into having impact across the health ecosystem. One of the unique points of differentiation for Komodo is that our data is sourced from varied sources, and we've actually taken the time through AI and machine learning, not to use a lot of buzzwords, to really characterize that data and put it within context. So when you are looking for insights or trying to get insights out of that underlying data asset, you know exactly what you're looking at, and you can put that within the appropriate frame to really understand what is happening across the healthcare ecosystem. And one of the main ways in which we try and frame those insights is really around the journey of the patient, not the journey of the pill, but the journey of the patient. And what that framing has allowed us to do is to really go to multiple sources, to characterize those sources, link them into what we've called our underlying healthcare map as our data foundation, to the point of having roughly 330 million unique patient lives within that underlying data asset. And that data asset is live, it's living, it's breathing, it's always within context. We're constantly refreshing it. We're constantly sourcing new data sources to pull into it. We actually had a press release last week around some strategic partnerships with bringing in some other sources of data like genomics data, to really elevate the insights that can be pulled from the healthcare map. But that is our healthcare map. That is the underlying data asset. And then, but more importantly, like I've said, we really want to get to insights. We really want to empower our customers and our partners with insights that they can leverage to scale their impact. And so to do that, that's where we also have developed technology and software to be able to seamlessly extract insights from that underlying data asset, our healthcare map. Fully appreciating that not everyone, including myself, is a data scientist. And so not everyone can write code. And this is where software kind of comes into play, and really understanding what the customer needs are across the healthcare system, and designing software that can satisfy their needs in a pretty seamless way. So again, they can drive for impact. Last few words I'll say about Komodo is we primarily serve the life sciences ecosystem, so biopharma more generally, and we're working across different subsegments. So I come in supporting and providing guidance on how we partner and scale for impact our customers who are specifically focused within the clinical development space. So think through clinical trial strategy, think through clinical trial operations, think through evidence generation. That's my wheelhouse. But we also support commercial teams across biopharma, such as marketing and branding team and sales teams. We support health economics and outcomes research. We support medical affairs. We support patient services. We support digital. We're effectively working across the entire span of subsegments within biopharma to really bring our underlying healthcare map and the richness of the contextualized data there to insights, and to help these customers really ultimately drive for impact. Um, Even though we primarily serve biopharma, we also support a lot of patient advocacy organizations as well, because that is near and dear to our mission to reduce the burden of disease. So we work across several of them, and it's one of them that ultimately, through our partnership with them, enabled us to support them as they were part of the cancer moonshot opportunity within the White House, specifically on the colorectal cancer side, as well. So just a few words on Komodo, and again, hopefully that resonates with the audience. And Martin, I'll pass it to you if there are any questions from the audience, or if you wanted to shift the conversation in any particular way.
Yeah, well, first, just a great synopsis of what is so important now in healthcare, that companies really understand where they can bring value. And that's really what resonated from what you said. So understanding that data, has a power in and of itself, but the actual importance of that data is changing outcomes, changing people's lives based upon the insights that you get from looking at that data in very specific ways. So that's really how I see the secret sauce of Komodo, is being able to, lock in the core goal, but then being able to bring its proprietary algorithms, its understanding about how to look at things from a specific vantage point that other people don't have yet, that brings these insights to decision makers. And ultimately, that's what we're looking for. So, decision makers, what's exciting for me, fall into different categories now. So, the barriers between physicians, nurses, and other healthcare providers and patients is closing. And so I am very proud to work with companies that look at registering disenfranchised patients into clinical trials, where there is a power gap and a healthcare equity gap between patients and industry, and patients and providers. And so I think what you speak to, and what some of these emerging companies, some of which I'm fortunate enough to work with, like Clinical Trial Hero, they speak to this issue of hearing patient needs. And so I think whether it's cancer, like the cancer moonshot in the White House, or other examples of projects, which I'm sure you're going to tell us about, that Komodo was working on, it's this value driven message in the ethos of Komodo that I think is so important for people who are listening now and on the recording understand. So that really, I think, speaks volumes to how impressed I am with what Komodo is doing and the importance of its mission.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. And you brought up disparities in care, and definitely within the United States, one of the main frames in which we think about that is through the lens of race and ethnicity, and understanding the history of the country, and how that kind of correlates back to, unfortunately, um, not the best health outcomes. And one of the huge investments Komodo made, which was mission aligned, was to ensure that we could have an understanding of the different races and ethnicities of that 330 million unique lives we have within our underlying data asset. And this goes back to, again, the notion of context. How do you put this within context and understand who these patients are? So there's a significant investment we made towards the end of 2021, which I was extremely proud of, to be proud of the company, and to see that realized, where we at least today stand at the point where we have about two-thirds of our healthcare map represented through the frame of race and ethnicity. So now we can begin to unpack where there could be disparities in care. This is exactly part of the analysis that we did in partnership with Fight CRC, which is a nonprofit patient advocacy organization we've been working with within the colorectal cancer space as part of the cancer moonshot initiative from the White House, where we worked with them to understand where are the disparities of care. Um, how does race and ethnicity and location really begin to show up as key points of differentiation as it pertains to screening rates for colorectal cancer, and then also ultimately outcomes based upon when said patients were screened. And that is insightful data to have. It's insightful insights to drive towards, because now policymakers, now healthcare organizations, now patient advocacy organizations, now biopharma actually know where there are opportunities. So conceptually, we think that there are opportunities. Conceptually, we feel that there are opportunities. We see it anecdotally, but now we can actually drill down, and we can isolate them and unpack them. And I don't want to stand and say it's only Komodo's data. It's not only Komodo's data, but that's definitely a key input into starting that conversation and framing it, and understanding exactly where to target efforts. And more importantly, after we've made those interventions, or after makers have made those interventions, do those interventions work? We can then go back to the underlying data asset and surface those insights to see what were these outcomes, and which outcomes actually scaled, and
Mhm.
how should we think about scaling these outcomes across the ecosystem. The last other comment I'll make in terms of ongoing projects we have with our biopharma customers. So if you're close to the space and close to some of the recent FDA regulations and guidance on increasing the representation of underrepresented minorities within clinical trials. The FDA posted a guidance there and is really tasking biopharma customers to develop biopharma, really tasking biopharma to develop diversity plans to speak to how they will be taking active steps to ensure that the patients that are enrolled in clinical trials are actually representative of the patients who are burdened with this disease in the real world, especially through the lens of race and ethnicity. And we've had constant conversations, partnerships with our customers based on our underlying data asset to help them see that, to help them understand, hey, if you include this inclusion or exclusion criteria within your protocol, these are the downstream ramifications on how that impacts the total available patient populations, segmented by different races and ethnicities, segmented by locations. And in some instances, based on the mechanism of action of that molecule, those are inclusion exclusion criteria that have to be included. But at least now you know, and you can mitigate the risk in terms of what you need to do in addition, in light of that, to ensure that you are recruiting a diverse and representative patient population. But in areas where you may have a bit more leeway to consider not including those inclusion exclusion criteria, now you have the power of some real world data and insights to help you make a more informed decision around that. So those are like areas in which we're actively working with our customers, our partners, to really drive towards outcomes, and in a real way that we know have downstream ramifications.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there and so many important things to talk about. So first of all, the notion that the government on an approval process tack is now fully engaged. So if you're doing a phase 3 trial, you have to have a diversity plan. Um, that speaks volumes for the catalyst that is going to drive everything you're doing and other organizations that are doing similar things to improve on the healthcare diversity gap that exists. The other thing, is that if we look at the data, only 4% of patients who are in minority groups or in other kind of DEI categorized groups, of which there are many, by the way, um, including social determinants of health. There's only 4% of the patients that have been enrolled in clinical trials. And so, intuitively you say, well, this is not fair, it's not proper. But from a medical and from a scientific standpoint, what we're finding is that the safety and efficacy data is skewed because in all of the studies that have been looked at since 2017, only 20% of those studies have any mention at all of patients who fall into the DEI categories. And what that means is that if you give a drug to a specific community, you don't know if that drug is safe or effective at the same level as the information that came from the studies. And so we're finally coming up to speed with this notion that all of these different factors need to be properly put into, as you said, the data pool, the data asset, so that we can get these more accurate insights. And that is going to be more and more important, as we begin to look at personalized and precision medicine. That whole theme of how can we do a better job collectively? What is the collaboration that's necessary between patients, industry, healthcare providers? So that's where I see Komodo as really stepping in and other companies stepping in with this kind of shout out, which I will extend out today to companies and to people and companies that are listening or listening to the recording, because it is a new era in terms of how companies are growing. And I am super excited about the next decade for sure, because it does speak to the need for companies to come and work with Komodo and work with Clinical Trial Hero and work with other companies like Ecotone, for example, that is looking to solve the problem of rare diseases and to gather that data, which is so important to be able to look at 10,000 rare diseases don't have treatment algorithms. So it's fairly, you know, it's just the tip of the iceberg, which makes me so excited to bring you on. Um, I know you have so much to say. I also know you have some slides that you want to talk to some of the projects that you're working on. Um, but really back
Yeah,
to you, Kwame, to pick up on so many of the things that we just talked about.
yeah, for sure. No, I think that my mind is going in so many different ways. So a few comments to what you shared. And so definitely echoing the opportunity, the invitation to collaborate. That is part of Komodo's operating model, to be honest. So I've talked about our underlining data asset, but our founders, when they were creating and envisioning where they wanted Komodo to be, it was through the lens of collaboration. So our underlying data asset, as vast as it is and as comprehensive as it is fundamentally designed in a way where we can link to other data sources. And I think that is foundational because we appreciate that we don't have it all. And therefore, we need to collaborate with other stakeholders across the ecosystem to actually truly enable richer and richer insights to get to more and more impact. So we've foundationally designed our data asset, our healthcare maps, to be linkable, and fascinating to see the some of the underlining other data assets. Some of them are private. Some of them are a bit more readily available within the public space, but some of them are also proprietary to different biopharma customers. And being able to link that into the breadth and depth of our underlying healthcare map to surface up even richer insights is part of our operating model. So 100% echoing the opportunity to collaborate and to partner to enable this. So that's one thing that came to mind. The other piece is definitely around the outcomes and the the notion of the lack of participation of underrepresented minorities in clinical trials, and this is a multifaceted problem. I definitely think there's a role and a foundational role of data and some of the data that Komodo has been able to acquire, but then more importantly, data within context to drive for some of these results. But there is so much that also exists outside of the realm of data, and it really exists with how we are partnering with these specific communities to build or repair trust, depending on your vantage point. So again, another opportunity to collaborate with companies and organizations who are looking to establish, pillars of trust within these communities to understand um, exactly their barriers to enrolling in clinical trials, and to build solutions that reflect their localized inputs and their concerns, but that is also powered by some real world data and some insights in terms of understanding some of their unmet needs. So that's definitely also another call and another area. The last thing I'll say though is we've engaged with customers today where we've one of our software solutions um, is able to quickly surface directional insights around differences in care, and it's pretty fascinating to sit with a customer to design a cohort. So let's say I am looking for patients who've been diagnosed with colorectal cancer within the last year. We literally can do this at a click of a button. It's a no code solution. We can isolate it to different geographies, but it's very interesting to do that and to throw on a lens of race and ethnicity and say, hey, I want to actually look at the subset who are, white, or the subset who are black, or the subset who are Asian, and then add a with a couple other clicks of a button, we have an analytic report that can actually show you the patient journeys. So we can quickly show you and say, yes, these are all the patients who are diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Now they're segmented by different races or ethnicities, or maybe they're segmented by different geographies. And we can say, hey, within this geography or within this group of patients, based on when they were actually diagnosed with colorectal cancer, we can see when they actually received their first screen, and we can understand those disparities in care. We can actually surface up the locations where they got their screening and the doctors that got their screening. We can quickly see and show, hey, Dr. Martin actually, for whatever reason, is screening twice as many patients relative to Dr. Kwame. And that is targeted insights for companies to reach out to Dr. Martin and understand what's happening. What's happening? We see this inside of your data. What are you doing differently
Right.
in your institution, and how can we think about scaling that across the company? That's where the richness and the power is with the collaboration and the data driven kind of outreach that we think can lead to just so much more impact and success.
No,
So thank you.
that's just absolutely fantastic. One of the things that I want to, talk about is kind of high level. So, for many, many years, the notion of collaboration between pharma companies or biotech companies was really, it was not on the table. There was, a intellectual property moat that was protected, for all the right reasons. But, sharing information, sharing research, sharing data, and you talk about the asset of data, that is a relatively new phenomenon, over the past, let's say, decade, but certainly more even with impact over the past 5 years. I want to just get a better understanding from a high level perspective. When you're working with biopharma sponsors and you've been in the industry now for a while, do you get this feeling that there is this real, understanding that sharing data that traditionally might have been proprietary is something that they are open to, that they that they see as a two-way street from a high level perspective, or are there corridors? Different companies with different, you know, ethos. How does that segment out? Between biotech and pharma and some of the different companies that you see and in a high level.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's a mixed bag, but I think like directionally the industry appreciates that there's power in the collaboration and the sharing. Because if you think about it, not to be reductionist here, but the data is their gold, right? So the outcomes of different clinical trials, the insights they're getting through research is it's part of their core capabilities, part of their key areas of differentiation, and ultimately, it's drivers for some economic activity, right? Which could ultimately or hopefully feed back into the R&D engine. So those are things that are being considered at the higher level. But I think there is a much more appreciation that to really be able to scale and have impact, there has to be some collaboration here. And so I think the mindset is shifting towards, hey, what can we do in a collaborative manner that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily um, um, take away what can we do in a collaborative manner that really presents itself as a win-win, is
Right.
what I see and feel. And even the times I was at Genentech, we were talking about this even through the clinical operations lens of thinking through, hey, we have our own internal data around when we've interacted with different sites or locations or hospitals, how that interaction went. That's proprietary to our engagement with them, but we'd love to understand how other companies or other institutions, um, what their experiences have been. So that requires us to collaborate and share some of that stuff. And then similarly within the notion of some patient level data that's received during the course of a clinical trial or over the course of some research, I think it's a similar lens. And I think what generally is enabling the conversation to shift towards more open collaboration, or to shift more towards collaboration, is the advancements we have in technology to
Yeah.
enable. So specifically, I can talk. We don't do this. We're a beneficiary of this, which is tokenization technology to ensure that we are maintaining patient privacy,
Mhm.
and not necessarily increasing any re-identification risk when we connect different sources of data.
Mhm.
And we can do that in a secure and controlled way, where the parties who are sourcing and collaborating or bringing the data together can trust that that is secure. Arguably 10, 15-ish years ago, those technologies did not exist. And so it was very hard to enable this, but we're living in a time where we actually have this. And to be honest, this is part of what's led to a fair amount of Komodo's success, being able to leverage these technologies and scale them uh, across the ecosystem. So that's actually a good segue to one other use case or one other project we've been working on, which more or less shifts begins to shift the conversation around how we even think about gathering or collecting data for clinical trials. And so, for the folks who are close to the space, you've most likely heard about the concept of wearable data arms, external control arms, synthetic control arms, which I think are here today. I mean, the industry, the FDA released some guidance towards the end of last year, I believe, around how to frame some of this stuff. And Komodo has been fortunate to partner with some companies to explore this. The one that is in the public domain is called is a company, Intercept. So you can definitely look that up, where we partnered with them. And Martin, if you want to pull up the slide deck, I think it's maybe slide 19. If not, I can just speak to it, where I can control it, so I can pull this up. We partner with them to really think through their clinical trial, where there were some challenges with recruiting for a control arm for one of their clinical trials relative to the standards of care that existed. And we worked with them to say, hey, we actually think there's enough real world data to actually characterize the outcomes that you would have assumed to get within that control arm. So let's actually not recruit for that control arm. Let's only recruit for that experimental arm, and let's leverage the available real world data to characterize the outcomes of patients in the control arm. And it's fascinating to think that we can do this today. And if you think about scaling this effectively could cut in half all the patients that you would think about recruiting for specific clinical trials. I'm not going to say this can be applicable to all clinical trials. We're definitely at the early phases of this, but this is happening today. This is filed with the FDA today, and we are not necessarily the only company doing this, but I think we are uniquely positioned to support customers across biopharma to enable this based upon the our healthcare map and underlying data asset that I spoke about, plus the software technology that is able to surface up these insights. So this is one project we're extremely proud about, which is the beginning of a broader movement to really think through how are we designing clinical trials, how are we executing clinical trials, where do we see opportunities to pull in real world data to either augment or in some cases like this case fully replace the need for a specific control arm and not to necessarily have patients go through that. Think about all the cost savings associated with only having to recruit for 50% of the patients that you thought you would have to recruit for because now you can leverage real world data. But then, even more importantly, think about the downstream ramifications here and the opportunities about continuously getting additional data on these patients. So we again live in the world today where we can do that. We can understand these patients who are part of this clinical trial. What were their mid to long term outcomes? We can go back and understand that. We can understand if there are safety risks that developed. We can understand when these therapy is approved by the FDA, to what extent were the patients who were enrolled in that trial really representative of the broader population, and how do we see the outcomes of these patients potentially shifting? These are now things we can do. And then more importantly, once we've generated that evidence, how do we respond as a ecosystem? What are we going to do? Do we think we need to adjust things within the design of the molecule? Do you think we need to approach potentially a new clinical trial to further validate some of the evidence we're seeing? This again can empower decision makers with a lot of insights to ensure that they're thinking about things from a long term perspective and really making significant or making the right trade off decisions as they're thinking through some of the limited resources and constraints that we all have to deal with. So wanted to highlight that as another key area of another key project that we're working towards, which I think is fantastic and beginning to shift how, or an example of that shows how companies are beginning to shift the notion of how to collaborate and how to leverage real world data.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. You know, you bring up so many interesting points, and I just want to focus in on two of them. So, what are other companies doing? And I'll just highlight one company in silico, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. They have brought a drug to market in 30 months, which is just outstanding. And that was driven by an AI model pulling together drug targeting, validation, um, all the way through to commercialization. And typically, as most people watching, are incredibly sophisticated in the healthcare space know, it's more than 12 years, 12 and a half years to be more accurate, of the typical time frame to bring a drug to market. So 30 months is just off the charts, a grand slam home run in terms of how quickly we get a novel drug to a patient, the cost of that process. And then I think it speaks to the second issue, which is the quality of the data. So you talk about real world evidence, you talk about how data is being used, and we're gaining insights from that. But I do think, and kind of to circle back a little bit, about the diversity issue, the representation of the population has to be accurate, and so the data is an asset, but the insights and the outcome are really the impact of that asset. And so what you're talking about here is super exciting. And I think it also, kind of supports the notion that we have to be very careful about how we collect data. And you said how we design trials, like what is it that's important to put into that? And how many how many lenses can we put on that, to get as much insight from that as possible? And I think that goes to the other issue, which is collaboration, because different industries and different companies, even within a sector, are going to have different needs. So that's exciting to me because the ability on the investor side, which is where I hang my hat, um, is a driver of a lot of this. The liquidity that's being pumped into the healthcare system is 10x other sectors at a time where liquidity is being pulled out by central bankers. And so I think that one of the things that's exciting is not only are these incredible scientific and medical breakthroughs and discoveries, but there are real investor dollars being put to use to drive these ideas forward. And if you then bring in this notion that government is behind it and there's collaboration within industry, this to me is the most exciting secular growth story, yeah, at least in my lifetime within healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I reflect on like both sides of the coin here, and I think about the richness of, I'll just focus on Komodo for now. The richness of the underlying data asset we've been able to stitch together over the course of the last 9 years, but then also the software solutions we built to extract insights, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I remember I remember when I was at Genentech, and thinking through trying to answer different questions or go through different scenario planning for different clinical trials, and starving for some of these insights that we didn't have at that time. So it's really a shift that is already in place, and I think it's worthwhile like appreciating and acknowledging that. But on the flip side, there's just so much more opportunity. To your point about investor dollars flowing into this space, and I think that's happening because there's still so much opportunity. There are
Mhm.
still, in today, 2023, May 2nd, there are still companies or hospitals out there who are running clinical trials, and they're filling out stuff on paper.
Oh yeah, no,
It is
most
still
are.
happening. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's still happening. So think about all that data that is still locked within physical paper. A lot of hospitals still have fax machines. Think about all that data that is again locked still there. So there's definitely need and opportunity across the board to begin to think, when you're talking about the quality of the data, to begin to like surface this raw data that's still out there. Um, Even surface that out to then be able to understand it. One other notion with quality, which I really wanted to emphasize, is and I think this is an area of differentiation for Komodo. I've talked about this a lot, but I think it's so true because I've been a former customer. Is this whole notion of setting the context? So to me, quality of data comes is in close relation to the context of the data. Like, where is that data coming from? How is that connected? What does this actually say about the source of the data? What are additional insights? So putting that within context. I've lived in a world where I get data dumps, and it doesn't have context. I get only a sliver of the pie from a particular vendor around some patient level data or some provider level data, and I'm starving for context. Like, I understand that vantage point, but I don't see how that's connected to a broader system, and that's where I think you know Komodo sets itself apart. Like, we are constantly trying to put the underlying data we receive within context. We are constantly trying to empower our end customers to change their context,
Right.
to surface up different insights. And I think that's extremely powerful. Going back to your comments on quality. So just wanted to add that perspective.
I really appreciate that. I mean, you're bringing really, such important information. It's really a unique privilege because you are sitting, at a decision making point within the company. You are at a level where you can see 360. You've been in industry. Now, you're a part of, a cousin to what you
Mhm.
originally were involved with. And I think that you probably see this dynamic changes that you've been describing more intimately than almost anybody who's watching here today. That kind of where have we been, where are we now, and where are we going is kind of the last piece. So you put on the table this notion of these various tributaries off the main, data asset river,
Mhm.
where we can improve the quality and the speed and the efficiency of clinical trials. What do you see as, let's say, the next big thing in terms of technology? There's been a lot of talk about quantum computing, for example. I don't know how that potentially would impact, your company. I would imagine it would be significant, but it's a number of years away. But what do you see as, in your, let's say, progression or these different milestones as healthcare changes, from your years at Genentech now to Komodo, and then going forward to these developments through in silico and your amazing piece in your slide deck about what the future of clinical trials might look like. What's the technology piece that you see as exciting?
Yeah, so my head is going in multiple in multiple areas here. And again, also limited by my vantage point, but I'll answer that from a notion of um, I see technology more so towards through the lens of what can technology enable, who can technology empower, and when I think about that, and I think about healthcare, and I think about specifically clinical trials, the answer to that to me is the patient. So I envision a world which I don't think we're too far out from, where I, as a patient, I'm empowered with my own data,
Yes.
and I can understand exactly how my specific outcomes, how my specific nuances or my uniqueness correlates to the population, and what are some of the outcomes that exist there. I can understand uniquely to me what would be some of the side effects or likelihood of specific outcomes if I take treatment X over treatment Y, and really empowered with that notion. So the computational power to be able to do that, maybe some of that is within the quantum computing stream. I'm not an expert in that, so don't hold me to that. But I do think being able to advance kind of the computational power, but then more importantly, to do that in a way where it's driving towards insights that are unique to individual patients, that I can walk into my doctor's office and my doctor understands who I am as an individual, but then is also supported by some insights from my unique health history relative to others who look like me, others who look different than me, and surfacing up things that could be similar in terms of being able to approach my specific treatment or understand what I need to do uniquely to be healthy. And I see Komodo playing a significant role in that with the underlying data asset we've been able to build so far, with the notion of the fact that we've built it in a way where it's linkable to other data assets to surface even richer and richer insights. And
Hmm.
then with the whole notion that we're not just ending at the data. We want to get to those insights. So, I mean, think the way to do that is through technology and software, and the needs of the doctor would be different than the needs of the patient, would be different than the needs of biopharma, would be different than the needs of the hospital administrator,
Absolutely.
would be different than the needs of the payer. And we are uniquely positioned very uniquely positioned to be able to influence all of those different stakeholders, all pulling from that underlining data asset, but then I'm going to sound like a broken record, putting it within context, putting it within context with the specific customer needs and what they're driving forward. So that's what I envision. That's a world I would love to live in, and I consider myself, pretty fortunate to be able to start to make that real with Komodo and with the extended team that we have here, and with day-to-day collaboration with our partners and our customers.
I absolutely could not agree more. It really speaks to one of the things that I'm proud about working on, which is a patient marketplace. So we're developing at Clinical Trial Hero this notion that patients can actually engage in bringing their personal information that addresses their specific needs in these different cohorts of ethnicity, race, gender specificity, and disease specificity to a marketplace where they can make suggestions and recommendations to clinical trial designers, make recommendations to data gatherers as they begin to write the code that drives these algorithms. So I'm very excited about that notion. I'm so glad, and we didn't talk about this before, so I'm so glad to hear that this is such an exciting next step in your field of vision, because that drives a lot of the thought that we're working on, which is how to empower patients with their own data is a critical element. And then there is this flywheel, where they feel more empowered, they're more likely to engage, there's more trust, there's more involvement in the clinical trial experience. And so this flywheel then is built upon win-win-win situations.
It is, and for Komodo specifically, we're approaching this again through the lens of collaboration and partnership for where we stand today, and a lot of the work we do with patient advocacy is through that lens. This is not something we're looking to generate revenue from. This is literally something we see as mission aligned. We
Mhm.
see as getting to impact, and these patient advocacy organizations are representing the patients today. And so we can definitely envision a future where patients, leverage that, the benefit of the patient advocacy organizations, but then the patients can also represent themselves. So we'll be eager to see how Komodo plays in that space in the
Yeah.
future. But for now, we're definitely doing it through the lens of partnering with patient advocacy organizations, and then also partnering with our more traditional customers, biopharma, to empower them with these patient-centric insights that are able to be surfaced from our underlying data, so that the decision makers within these companies have that perspective, from a real data vantage point, that can be augmented with them also speaking directly with patients and also interacting with other stakeholders, because I think it's all about impacts, and that's the game we want to play in. Data to insights to impact. That's the spectrum in which we want to go.
I think that says it all. It's a perfect time to say thank you to you for coming and spending this 45 or so minutes together. And thank you for everyone here who has logged on. I want to thank again Gary, um, Martin, Malik, Nikhil, um, Raj, Rob, so many people, so many interesting comments. We will forward some of these off to you, Kwame. I know that people have interesting questions, but the dynamic, you know, of the day was so exciting that we had so much to cover. I would love to invite you back and follow up when there's more projects to talk about. We just scratched the surface with some of the things you're doing with the White House and some exciting cancer companies. I think that the message here is keep your eyes tuned for amazing things out of Komodo over the next short period of time, and watch the dynamic explode with creative options. And so it is about collaboration and recognizing that there's power in the data when we come together for focused altruistic reasons. And I think that over the next decade, you're going to see more and more creative use cases. Um, the improvements are just going to be exponential. So thank you everyone for coming in. I will say, please tune in next Tuesday for another exciting webinar. Over the next several weeks, we are going to be highlighting different aspects of companies. So we are going to certainly be focusing in on the DEI community with women CEOs who are doing incredible things in leadership positions. We're also going to be taking a high level perspective about some of the ways that corporate accelerators are working together to bring together partnerships that normally were not in place. So in Israel, for example, there's Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca, and Merck all working together in a new accelerator. In France, there's Sanofi, Generali, Orange, and Capgemini, a company that I work with closely. These collaborative spirits, I think, are really things that we want to highlight in future webinars. And so stay tuned for those things. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Kwame, if you can hang on for a couple minutes. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Martin.